Hi, everybody. It's Mr. Francy, and welcome back to another podcast, Sparkle Sparkle with Mr. Francy. I hope you guys are having an amazing month here in March. We're getting so close to the end of the month. I am so happy to be here. We are live for the first time doing this podcast. Before I go any further, I do want to introduce some fabulous co hosts that are joining me today. Starting off with the wonderful Hannah from Buggy Reads. Hi, Hannah.
Hi, Mr. Francy. Hi, everyone.
Wonderful to have you here. And we also have Storm from Storm Reads. Hi, Stormy.
Hello, how everybody?
And Jane from the Reading Nook. Now, do I have that right, Jane?
Yes, you do.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Hello. Okay, so we're going to get into two different topics today. Now, the first one was recommended to me over on my Discord. So if you have not joined us over on the Discord, link to that will be in the description. I'm really happy to talk about this topic because it is one that I have heard pretty much since I've joined BookTube, and that is the topic of something being considered to be not reading. And so that would be referring to things like listening to audiobooks, reading novellas, potentially even reading an ebook as opposed to a physical book. And so I'm really happy to open this up to everyone that is here. Now, if you are here watching, listening, I'm so saying watching. If you're here listening to the podcast, please feel free to type in any comments that you would like to, and we will discuss them as we do move along. I want to say hi to Cajun, who has said hi all. Hi, Cajun. Thank you very much for being here. So I guess I'll just go around the massive square. We'll start off with Hannah. Now, so Hannah, have you heard about this audiobooks and ebooks and novellas not being considered to be actual reading? And what is your thought on that?
I have heard of it, and personally, my thought is as long as you're out there and you're reading, it shouldn't matter what format you're reading, as long as you're like exercising your brain and getting out there and reading something.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Now, do you read books other than physically reading a standard book? Like, do you listen to audiobooks or read ebooks or anything like that?
Yes, actually, just this month, I went more into doing audiobooks, because I've been doing like physical ebook or an actual book. Um, And I'm retaining the information from the books the same way I was if I was reading it with my eyes as I am reading it with my ears.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you're making there. It's still consuming the book, even if you're doing it in a different way. So I really appreciate hearing that from you. You did already answer that, but but I wanted to make a point of it, considering that you started leaning into it more, as you were saying rather recently. Did you find any major differences, even if they were positive differences?
Um, I think the only difference that I had between the two of them was trying to adjust the speed of the ebook or the audiobook to match the speed of what I read. Because I can't just pick up an audiobook and be like, "All right, one speed is just exactly what I need." I have to match it up to where my eyes go, which is about 2.33 is about right where my eye speed is.
Yeah, yeah, no, I completely understand that. So, would you say that you are listening to the audiobooks while you're reading along with a physical?
No, I can't focus on two things at once like that. I have a memory of a goldfish and the attention span of a squirrel. So that doesn't help me out some. But no, I just matched it like if I feel like the audio narrator is going too slow, I push him up to about the speed that I personally talk. And then uh which is also about the same speed that I read at. So that's where I was coming from.
Right. Yeah, no, I understand that, and thank you for that. Very, very interesting hearing your opinion on it. Considering that you have jumped into it, lent into it more recently, do you think that with the audiobooks, it's something that you might continue to do in the future?
Well, for sure, I'll do it more in the future. In fact, I've been planning out my TBR for April and May with consideration with the audiobooks, especially with all the cozies that I've been reading. It helps, it helps. Trying to think of the right word, but it helps lighten the load. Basically, is if I have audio and physical, it helps me get through most of those cozy mysteries that I need to get to.
Yeah, no, I can definitely understand that. I'm gonna move over to Stormy. Now, Stormy, I am aware that you, well, I know that you do read ebooks, and I am aware that you listen to audiobooks. Do you read physical books as well?
Yes, I do.
So, as someone who does read all those different types, uh, uh, do you feel that the suggestion that reading in a way that's different to reading a physical book is not reading, or do you agree with what Hannah is saying in that it is a valid form of reading?
Oh yeah, I think it's a valid form of reading because I think if you was to say that audiobooks aren't reading, then that's kind of putting down like those who have to read that way. You've got the people that cannot see, they're blind, they might listen to audiobooks. Like, and then take Tiffany, whose eyes are really bad. She has to listen to mostly audiobooks, but it's still reading, she's still retaining. She still tells you what all her books that she listened to was about, and her wrap ups and things like that. So, yeah, I think that's just not fair to the person that's reading them, telling them that they're not actually reading. So,
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. Now, have you noticed any differences, be they positive or negative, between the different types of reading?
I do know that I think I read faster when I use an ebook, but then I also do read a little bit faster if I do audiobooks, so I can consume more books during the month. If I
Yep.
was to just do physical books, I probably would read like 5 books because I read slower. But so
Yeah.
there's a positive thing to that. And I think as long as I'm remembering what I'm reading, then I don't think it really matters how you do it.
Yeah. No, I completely understand it, and do agree with you. And I think that if I was just physically reading and that was all, that I would be reading a lot significantly less than I do. Now, am I right in this? Please tell me if I've got this wrong. But do you have an ebook or physical book going at the same time as an audiobook? Like not necessarily reading them at the same time, but open. So like two books that you might be reading in the same period of time, I guess, in different ways.
So you mean like at the same time, but not like right at the same time? Like,
Yeah, so like two completely different books, one that you might be physically reading or reading as an ebook, and another one that you'll have as an audio book that in the same time frame of like the same
yeah,
few days or that week or whatever.
yes, I do. I'm a multi-book
Yeah.
reader.
Yeah, that's what I thought I was picking up on in your reading vlogs. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I wanted to see if you felt that there are advantages to having an audio book going alongside a book that you are physically reading in that same time space.
Yeah, I think that there's sometimes when you're doing stuff that you can't actually physically read. Like I like to listen to my audiobooks while I'm out in the garden or doing like yard work or dishes or whatever, and it just gives you extra reading time.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. No, thank you for that. Let's move over to Jane. So Jane, how does it work for you? Do you physically read, physically ebook, audio? How does that work for you?
I read mostly ebooks and I listen to audio as well. I only just recently got into a little bit more audio. I got a free trial on Audible and Scribd, so I'm kind of trying out audio. And I with what Hannah was saying about the speed, I have to change it up as depending on what the narrator's accent is. So it might be one book where I have to listen to it at 1.5 speed, and then the book that I just finished, I could listen to her at 2 times speed, but she has a British accent. But it's somebody else who has a British accent, I have to listen to it at a slower speed. So it's like kind of up and down. But yeah, I'm trying a bit more audio, and it's sometimes I have to concentrate a bit more when I'm listening to audio, but I'm finding it. I'm kind of like both. I'm getting used to listening to audio a bit more. I'm starting to like it a little bit, yeah.
Sorry, what was that last thing you said?
Oh, I was just saying that I'm starting to like or appreciate audiobooks more as I listen to more books.
Oh, no, that's fantastic. And so to that question that I'm having everyone answer, what is your opinion and thoughts on those out there who say that other than physically reading a book is not considered reading?
I don't understand why people say that. Because reading is reading. It doesn't matter how you take it all in. It's like what Stormy said. There are people out there that are visually impaired. They can't read, so they have to listen to it. People that have learning disabilities, for certain days they might not be able to process what they're looking at, so they have to listen to it. And when we were younger, before we even started reading, we were read to. We listened to people listen to people reading books to us. So does that mean that our children, our nephews, our nieces, they're not reading it like the rest of us do by actually looking at a book? It doesn't make sense to me. It's kind of off why people started thinking that way. This is reading whatever. Yeah.
No, that's a very good point that you make there, Jane. Yeah, I completely agree. We all kind of started off having someone reading to us. And so if we're going off the theory that audiobooks are not a valid form of reading, does that invalidate the experiences that we had when we were younger? I appreciate that. I want to open that up to the others. Hannah, what's your thought on that? Were you read to when you were younger?
Yes, I have very fond memories of both of my parents. They would read to me before nap time or before bedtime. And I think I was about 5 or 4 when I could start reading some of the words that were on the page because my mom would read them to me so many times. Like with their Bear Rabbit books from Uncle Remus, I could point out some of the words that were on the page.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And Stormy, what about you? Were you read to when you were younger?
Yeah, were you read to? Oh yes, my father used to read to me, and he would even do voices. So I even got the cool kind. And just like he had the Burr Rabbit and Burr Bear books, he read those to me, and he would do voices for the different animal characters or whatever, and so it was a lot of fun.
Nice. Yeah, I
That's what my
definitely have
dad
to
used
say
to
that I
do
agree.
too. It's with like the Harry Potter books.
Yeah. Did voices?
Yeah, he did voices. At bedtime, he would be the one who would read to me, and that was right when the Harry Potter books were first coming out. So he would do like the voices of all the characters and that. Like I can only read the books now with him reading the voices to me. Like that's how I picture it in my head.
Nice. Yeah, and Yeah, so definitely, I think for me, it's, and I think we're all agreeing here. This is something that we did experience, and Jane, I really appreciated that you brought that up, because it does make me wonder if that does invalid, if to the opinion of those that an audiobook, specifically an audiobook, is not a valid form of reading, does that in fact invalidate those experiences we had when we were younger that were so crucial to us, especially at a time when we may not have been able to read, and it's our first introduction to reading, and who knows how different things might have been had that not happened. I definitely have to say for myself, I never really understood the notion that multiple forms of reading aren't considered reading. I think to me, if you consume a book, no matter how you do, to the point that you would be able to discuss that book in some way, then obviously you have still consumed that book. So I don't quite understand why it is not referred to as reading. And I don't remember who it was that said this, but at least one of you was making the point, but there may have been multiple, so forgive me for that. They were making the point about there are some people who actually don't have the ability to physically read. Stormy, you definitely brought up a great example about, you know, someone in like Tiffany's situation who with her sight may struggle to physically read, and an audiobook may be the only way they can consume reading. I definitely have experienced that with people that I know. And so to invalidate that and to make them feel inferior when they don't have a choice, it is something that I always struggle to hear. But I don't think, I think regardless of whether you have that hurdle or not, if you choose to read an ebook or if you choose to listen to an audiobook, it is definitely still reading at the end of the day. And it's just something that surprises me. Uh, I want to add into this because as part of this coming up as a suggestion for this podcast to be discussed, someone was bringing up the topic of shorter books such as that of novellas, and is a novella considered to be reading? Now, in my opinion, definitely. Regardless again of how you're consuming it, if you're reading a book that has less pages, that does not mean that you're not necessarily reading. I'm going to go back around to everyone else and ask for their opinion. At the end of the day, every opinion is valid. So let's see what everyone else thinks. Jane, I'm going to start with you. So, Jane, do you think that reading a book that is, say, less than 100 pages is not considered to be reading?
No, I think it's considered reading. I mean, the books that we read when we were younger, like Nancy Drew or those Babysitters Club, Sweet Valley High, they weren't. I think I'm not sure how many pages they were, but they weren't. They definitely weren't 500 pages. So I mean, those
Yeah.
sorts of things, like Choose Your Own Adventure books, they were not long. So
Mm.
I think that if there's just because it's under 100 pages, there's a story in those pages. Doesn't matter what it
Yeah.
is. It's still reading. You're still reading it.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Stormy, what about yourself? What's your thought on reading books with less pages? Is it still considered reading?
Yeah, I think it's still considered reading. I think the opinion on whether you like those, because sometimes people think that there's not enough substance to them or whatever, and that can be true. But then you can find like some really good novellas that are really fleshed out really well and tell a really good story within a few pages. And so, I mean, it's just like reading short story collections and stuff like that. I mean, you're still reading, there's still stories. I read a children's book the other day. It was 90 pages, but I still read it. So, I mean, I still considered it a story.
Exactly. And Hannah, what are your thoughts about reading books that are less than 100 pages? Can still consider reading in your mind?
Of course, it's still considered reading. I mean, when we were all younger, our children's books, like the picture books and the like how Jay mentioned the Sweet Valley High and the Nancy Drew books, those weren't long books. Those were really short. So, I mean, if kids can read them and that's considered reading for them as well. So, it should be considered reading with a novella or a shorter style book is too, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I completely agree with what everyone is saying, and I'm so glad that you brought up even shorter books, because I was definitely thinking about that myself, like the children's picture books. Even if you were to read them, they're still books. And so in my mind, I do definitely still consider any length of a book, if it's still a book, if it's a book, you're still reading. So yeah, don't quite understand that. But I am seeing that we're getting some comments coming through. So I'm going to open up that floor and let's take a look at what everyone else is saying. Starting off with Cajun, who says, before he retired, my daddy was a truck driver and he listened to tons of well, it was books on tape back then. Oh, yes, I remember, Cajun. I think whatever method you use to take in the story is what we call reading. Yeah, completely agree. I'm going to just open this up to make it easier because we're on audio. If you'd like to jump in and respond to this, any of my co-hosts, just say your name first so that we know who it is. But have any of you listened to audiobooks on tape before? This is something I've done, so I'm intrigued to see if anyone else has.
I am Stormy here. I've actually I listened to some on tape, and they were a lot worse back then. So I think they have improved definitely with time. But yeah, I did try them. I wasn't a big fan back then. They at least the ones that I got, they were very monotone. I felt really bad for those that were had the impaired that had to, because that was the only thing that they could listen to.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for that. Hannah, it sounded like you were also going to jump in there.
Yeah. So I remember growing up, my dad got me the Lemony Snicket audio tape of the first book,
Yeah.
the Bad Beginning, and it was narrated by Tim Curry. And I have so many fond memories of listening to that while I was trying to go to bed, just because of how soothing Curry's voice was. And unfortunately, when I was in high school, our house got hit by a tornado, and that CD got all the CDs got destroyed. So I lost it, and I cannot find it anywhere because it was so soothing and it brought back so many memories.
Oh no, I'm so sorry to hear that, Hannah. I can definitely relate. Uh, when I was younger, growing up, my sister had a lot of learning difficulties, and so my mother purchased audio cassettes for her to listen to because it was recommended that they would help her. She kind of lost interest in them, but I liked them, so I started listening to them. And then unfortunately, not in the case like yours, Hannah, but we did end up losing them, and it was really tough because they held a lot of sentimental value for me. When I was going through some really tough times, I found them to be very soothing and things like that. I was very fortunate to come across some of them on YouTube many years later. I do wonder if it may be floating around on YouTube somewhere, but I'm sorry that you lost that.
That's interesting. I'll have to look and see if I can find it on YouTube. It's fine. I mean, it was like 10 years ago when it happened, and life goes on.
Yeah, no, that's true. All right, Cajun says, perhaps we need a new term to expand the general definition of reading. Yeah, okay. I will open that up to the floor and we'll see what everyone else says. We'll start off with Jane. Jane, what's your thought on that?
This is hard. I think reading is whatever way you want to take it in. If you're going to read it with your eyes, if you're going to listen to it on audio, or if you're going to have somebody read it to you, it doesn't matter. Just like Tammy, Cornflower Blue, I think is her handle. She reads to her mom sometimes.
Yeah.
So her mom's reading too. So I think whatever way you take in the written word, it's reading. End of
Yep.
end of sentence. I think.
I like that, Jane. Stormy, I'll go over to you. What's your thoughts on this?
Oh, let's see. I was looking up what like the actual definition of read meant.
Oh,
Curious.
I'm intrigued.
Like it says, look at and comprehend the meaning of written or printed matter by mentally interpreting the characters or symbols of which it is composed. So I'm guessing that they're meaning that maybe the ones that don't like, people that use audiobooks, they're not thinking that they can imagine the stuff in their head because they're listening to it, which I'm not quite sure I get that. I don't actually see pictures like a lot of people do, whether I'm reading or listening or whatever. And so I think that the definition should be that taking it in however, I mean, if you're listening or reading or it's a short book, a little book, I don't think it should matter. It's reading.
Yep. No, I appreciate that. Hannah, what about you? What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I agree with what both Jane and Storm are saying. Reading is however you take in the information, like how Tammy, her mom gets the information by Tammy reading to her, or people who are blind, they do Braille. It's just however you're getting the information given to you or retaining it, which through whatever forms.
Yeah, I definitely have to say that I completely agree. I while I see what the definition is saying, I feel that and while I definitely appreciate what Jane is saying, that maybe we can term use a different term, and I feel that one term we could use could be consuming, which could cover all different types of reading. I think if we were to change the terminology depending on the way that you are quote unquote reading the book, it may come across in a way that kind of degrades the option you've chosen with which to consume that book. But I do appreciate the thought nonetheless, Cajun. So thank you very much for contributing it. We have another comment from Cajun. And Jane, I'm going to go to you in a minute about this because it's referring back to what you said. It says, to what Jane said, I memorized Green Eggs and Ham being read to me, and then I would pick up the book and point to the words because I knew the story, if that makes sense. So, Jane, Cajun, talking about what you were saying earlier about memorizing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that because I know with my nephew, he's gonna be 7 in May. I know he was read to. I mean, my brother and his wife would read to him all the time, and they'd be reading certain books to him over and over again so often that he memorized it. And so I agree. Like even when we were talking about the books on tape, I remember we had those Disney books, and I can hear it in my head. The Mickey's Christmas Carol. We had that tape, and I can hear it in my head. The lines that were said. I mean, we watch the cartoon now, but when I hear that tape, there's that one scene at the very end that goes to Christmas Future when he does that laugh. It's in my brain right now because we listen to it so often.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to see the profound effect that it has. And I think, if anything, it further validates the different types of reading. So I really appreciate you bringing that to the forefront, Cajun. Thank you for that. Cornflower says, and hi, Cornflower, thank you for being here. Cornflower says, authors share their stories with us. Does it matter if we take in those with our eyes or ears? I don't think so. I completely agree with you, Cornflower. Absolutely. And I think that's why it's so fantastic that we have this forum to discuss this at the moment, because it is something that has been going around. It is something that I have heard being discussed, especially on a platform like this, on BookTube, with other booktubers, whether they agree with it or not. It is something that gets discussed. And so I really appreciate your perception of this, Cornflower, because it really, should it matter how it is done? No. So thank you. I appreciate that, Cornflower. Cajun says, I wonder the percentage of readers who were read to as a child versus not, or with our fingers, even for those that read by Braille. Yeah, that's a very, very good point as well, Cajun. I appreciate that. So I think we all said that we were read to, excuse me, read to as a child. Jane, did you comment on that? Did you say you were read to as a child?
Yeah, we were read to as a child and as children rather, and I definitely read to my nephew. Like, every time we visited, and he saw me in this certain reclining chair, he knew it was reading time. He'd take the stack of books, put it in my lap, and I'd have to read every single one to them. And there was always certain ones that he always gravitated to. I don't know if it's the way I read it, or maybe it's the inflection of my voice. He always wanted me to read all the time. So that I mean, yeah, it's really I thought it was a really, really cute bonding time between me and him to actually sit down and read a book, and we even read this one favorite book that he loved a lot. Over and over again, he wanted me to read the book, and I ended up almost memorizing the whole thing because I read it so often to him.
Oh, Jane, that's so beautiful. I'm having a very heartfelt moment here. That's beautiful. I love that. Wow. Okay, Cornflower says, my mum cannot see at this time because of medical reasons. I've read 4 books aloud to her recently. She feels like she's now read those books. Read those books as much as I do. Yeah, absolutely. And I can completely understand what you're saying there. Back in the day, back about 3-4 years ago, I was reading books to my mum too. And my mum has since gone on to start listening to audiobooks. But yeah, and I definitely can relate to that with me and my mum. I found it so special when I first found out that you do read to your mum, because I know what that does, especially if they can't read, for them to still be able to consume it. So thank you very, very much for allowing us to discuss that. I really, really do appreciate it. We're getting a lot of people saying hi to each other, which I appreciate. Susan G says, my dad would read to me when I was very young. I still can recall some of my favorites. The one that always pops in my head is an old golden book, The Pokey Puppy. Oh, Susan, I remember it well.
Me too.
My mom would call us the Pokey little puppy if we were taking too long. That was like her favorite nickname for us.
Oh, so cute. I have to go around the circle here with everyone and discuss this, since it has been brought up. It really does show our age. I'll start with Hannah and work my way around. So obviously, Hannah, you remember the Golden Books.
Yes.
Do you have any good memories, specific memories of them?
Well, like Jane was saying with her nephew about how he would bring up the stacks of books to her for her to read, I would do that every single day to my mom or to my dad. It depended on who was home at the time. And they would be like, we already read this book. I'm like, but I want it again. I want to hear the Pokey Little Puppy again. Or oh man, there were just so many. But I remember that one stood out like the most, because my mom would always call us the Pokey Little Puppy.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. Stormy, what about yourself? You remember the golden books?
Yes, I remember the golden books. I remember I used to have a whole bunch of them. I do believe that's how I might have had the Burr Rabbit and Burr Bear. I think they were a golden book at one time, I think.
Oh,
And
nice.
I had the Pokey Little Puppy and all those good ones and everything too.
Oh, so beautiful. Jane, did you have any experiences with the golden books?
Are those the ones with the gold spine on the end? On
Yes.
the end book? I think we had the Disney books, if I remember correctly. It's been so long. I'm old. I don't recall exactly, but we had a lot of those
Yep.
audiobooks, the audio tapes with the books that came with it, and things like that. I know Sesame Street we had, and we had the Disney ones.
Yep.
It's a Small World. I remember that one.
Yes.
Yeah. And my nephew,
Oh,
he loved 10 apples on top. And when I read it to him, and he said, this is a good book. And he said, again. I said, okay, again. I read it again. It's like after the fourth or fifth time, he said, again. Okay, I'll just keep on reading it over and over. So I know that one he really liked. There were some other ones like Curious George, or I think it wasn't Curious George, but it was about a monkey that let out the zoo animals out of their cages, and he's really sneaky
yeah.
about it. That one he liked it as well.
Oh,
He's
so
starting to read to
beautiful.
us now. Whenever we have our video chats, he'll read the graphic novel, like those graphic books for kids and things like that.
Yeah.
So he's
Oh,
starting to read it.
wow.
He's pretty good at it too now.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's so wonderful, Jane. Do you mind if I ask how old your nephew is now?
He's gonna be 7 in May, and his little brother is he just turned 2. Now we haven't started reading. We haven't seen him yet in person, but I'm sure he's probably going to want us to read to him when we see him.
Oh, that's so beautiful. It's one concern that I have in this day and age with modern day technology, especially with the younger generations, is that there are so many other things that they can be doing that sometimes I feel reading can be neglected. But children who are brought up with reading from a young age, it seems to be something that they do tend to carry on. And so the fact that you spent that time with your nephew and you can see what it's done now is just so beautiful. And yeah, I mean, just from one reader to another who's so passionate about people reading, I just want to say thank you for what you did and spending that time reading with your nephew. I just appreciate that so much.
And there's a he's starting to read to his little brother. Like there was one chat one day we were together on the video chat, and he asked his little brother, "Do you want me to read to you?" And he said, "Yeah." And they go off upstairs into the bedroom to go read, and that was the end of the conversation. But that was really cute when we see him. He actually asks his little brother if he wants to read to him, and he says in that little baby voice, "Yeah." And they go off. It's just super cute.
Oh my goodness. You've just made my day, Jane. Thank you.
I mean, I want him.
Wow.
To like reading as much as I do. So that the fact that that he wants to read and will read to his little brother is everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, wow. Oh, gosh. All right, let's keep moving. Cajun says, oh, the Pokey puppy. I remember that. Oh, yay. Susan says, I feel it's reading for the same reason Stormy mentions. Stormy, do you remember what that might be referring to?
I don't know. I think that's probably earlier on when we were talking about like reading and stuff. Like I don't know. Like at the very beginning when we were talking about how
right.
audiobooks were reading and stuff.
Yep. Oh, thank you, Susan. Hi, Bev. Thank you for being here. We're getting a lot of highs and highs. Cornflower says some of my favorite memories are of my mum reading to me. Oh, beautiful. Cajun says, the thing I've heard about novellas is that they are not real books, which I totally disagree with, as long as it tells a complete story. Yeah, and so I was very intrigued when this topic came up for discussion as to what others may consider to be not reading. And when this subtopic within this major topic came up about about novellas being included in that, and as you're saying here, Cajun, not considered to be real books, I was really surprised about that. Surprised to read that, I should say. As someone who myself, I am a very eclectic reader when it comes to genres and age ranges, but also page counts. I was very surprised. I definitely feel like novellas is definitely real books, so it definitely surprised me. I think it was being said a little earlier on, and I think Stormy was referring to this in saying it depends on, I don't want to quote you here, Storm, because I don't remember your exact words, but you were talking about sometimes a novella can be restricted because of its page count as to, I guess, how well fleshed out it can be if it's a fully rounded story. I'm sorry, Stormy. Do you remember what you were saying earlier?
Yeah, I think that was basically it. I mean, sometimes you read a novella and you're like, oh, that was okay, but it just needed something else. But then you can read a short story like that, a novella, and be like, that was a really good story, even though it was only like 80 pages. So it just depends.
Exactly. And guys, you heard it here first. Stormy was saying you can read a novella and and then you can read a novella. It's still considered reading. Bev says, yes, Jane, reading is reading no matter how many pages. Yep. There you go. Hi, Tatiana. Thank you for being here. Tatiana says, to each their own. Yep. Absolutely. Cornflower says, my mum got a lot of grief for buying my brother comic books in the 70s, but he wouldn't read full-length books. My mum was just so happy he was reading. Yeah, this is a very interesting topic. For someone like myself, I don't read comic books. There is one series of graphic novels I read, purely because they were by a little known author named Brandon Sanderson. But anyway, I still do consider that to be reading. I did want to open that up to the floor and hear of my co-hosts. We'll go around and see what everyone says. So my first question is going to be, have you read comic books or graphic novels? And regardless of if you have or not, do you still consider that to be reading? Let's start with Jane. Jane, what's your thought on that?
I haven't read comic books lately. I think I might have looked at the Archie comics when I was younger once in a while, but I think that what they call them graphic novels now. I think it's still reading. I mean, you have the words on the page and you have the illustrations there. But I think the illustrations help to what's the word? They help to what am I trying to say? It's it helps the story. It helps you understand what's going on in the story when you have the pictures there in front of you. And if it's illustrated really well, it adds to the words that you're reading on the page. It makes the story come alive.
Yeah, definitely. Completely agree. Let's check in with Hannah. Hannah, what are your thoughts? Have you read comic books or graphic novels, and do you consider that to be reading?
Yes, I have read both comic books and graphic novels, and I do consider it to be reading. I think, like, if you're like Storm, who doesn't visualize while you're reading like the words on the page, I think the graphic novels or the comics, they give you that visualization, so you can actually see what they're trying to pertain or what they're talking about in the book.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. And funny enough, we're now going to turn to Stormy. So, Stormy, same questions to you. Have you read comic books or graphic novels? Do you consider it to be reading? And your thoughts on what Hannah just said?
Yeah, I used to read comic books and everything whenever I was growing up, and I started reading graphic novels probably a couple of years ago. and I really enjoy them. Though I do think that some are better than others in like visual and things like the illustrations. But yeah, since I don't see anything in my head, it does help. It's like, oh, that's what their interpretation of like that character or whatever looks like. So it's kind of fun to see that. Um, my dad doesn't like to read, but he says he has to have pictures whenever he reads. So he liked graphic novels or comic books whenever he was growing up. That's what he used to read, a lot of them. We used to have a whole bunch of his old ones. I wish we still had them and everything. But yeah, he used to love Spider-Man and Superman and all those. But he wouldn't read anything else but that because he just can't. Uh, he gets bored and he falls asleep trying to read. But if he had pictures, then he could do it.
Yeah. No, there you go. No, I really appreciate that you brought that up, Cornflower. Yeah, it seems like it's unanimous over here. We all consider it to still be reading, and I think I would feel the same way that your mum does. Just being so happy that he was reading, despite the fact that I haven't read a comic book and that I've only read those 3 graphic novels from Brandon Sanderson, I would feel the same way with my child. I would definitely encourage it because, hey, they're reading, and I think that's wonderful. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And Cajun's agreeing as well, saying, yep, it was still reading. Hi, Cav. Cav says, my daughter didn't read until she was 11 due to a learning disability, and I read tons of books to her. She definitely knew the books as well as if she'd read them herself. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's definitely a valid form of reading. And Cav, sorry, before I go any further, I want to also thank you for doing that. I find these stories that not necessarily stories, but when I talk to anyone who discusses reading to others, it really finds a soft spot in my heart, and I really do appreciate it. So, Cav, I just want to say thank you, for what you did, and I'm sure that she really, really appreciated it. Definitely, I think we've definitely validated that it really doesn't matter what form or what way you are electing to consume a book, that it is still considered to be reading. So, if you are out there listening to this live or even listening to it delayed, and you are wondering if there is anything to others saying to you that you are not reading, try not to think on that. People are going to say what they're going to say, but at the end of the day, if you are consuming a book in any which way, shape, or form, you are still reading. You are still consuming that book. And don't let anyone take that away from you. I think that has been a very interesting discussion. And I'm so glad that we were able to go into it. I'm going to keep going because I'm seeing there's more comments now. I thought that we were at the end, but we're not, which is wonderful. So let's keep going. All right. Cav says, when you think about it, the root of the written novel is oral storytelling. It's the story that's important, not the medium used to enjoy it. I'm going to jump over to Stormy here because I love this comment and I want to hear your reaction to it.
Well, yeah, I don't think it matters. Yeah, as long as you're consuming the story, that's the important part because the author spent a lot of time writing this story, and so I'm sure they don't mind if you're reading or if you're listening or if somebody's reading it to you or anything or if you're using an ebook or whatever it is. They just want you to read their story.
Yeah. Exactly. Well said, Stormy. Okay. Cornflower says, Jane. So, Jane, I will hand this over to you. Jane, my grandson could have me read 10 apples up on top over and over for hours if only I had the patience. Jane, what's your reaction to that?
Oh, I remember that. Yeah. My nephew was the same way. I'd read it the first time, and he said, "I like this." I said, "Read it again," and I'll read it again, and he'll just keep asking me to read it over, repeat, I'll repeat, and I remember that. It was it makes me laugh because it's amusing when I think about it. So looking at that little face, and he's sitting there next to you, and you're reading the book, and he loves it. And like, it's a nice memory.
I just want to piggyback off of that. It's also like whenever a new person comes in and the parents are like, "No, you should let Tommy you should go read to blah blah blah," and it's like, haha, and now we have a few extra minutes to ourselves because they're gonna ask him to read that same book 20 times over again. Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
Yep. I love it. I love it. Okay. Cajun says, "Oh, that is so sweet. He reads to his little brother and shows that he's already enjoying reading." I think that was directed to potentially you, Jane, regarding your nephew. I think.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I loved hearing that. Susan says, "I've given a copy of the Pokey Puppy to all of my nieces and nephews, and now their children, with an inscription from me telling how my dad and their grandfather, great-grandfather, would read it to us." Oh, Susan, that is so beautiful. Oh my goodness. Wow. Aww. Kate says, "I don't care for comic books, graphic novels, but for those that do, they are reading." Yeah, Cajun, I'm 100% with you. Yep, absolutely. Susan says, "I never read comic books, but I still consider it reading. I say you are reading even if it's just the back of a cereal box." I love it. That's it. Absolutely. Cajun says, "Somebody has the YouTube name reads cereal boxes, and it always makes me smile when I see it." Yes. Absolutely. Cav says, "Who are these judgy people policing what we read? As a former school librarian who had a graphic novel section in her libraries, yes, reading comics is reading." Yeah, look, I completely agree with you, Cav. So to go back into the past, when I first started my booktube channel, this is not something that I was aware of, that there were readers, I assume readers, out there who were saying these different things, that you had to read in a certain type of way for it to be considered reading. And my instant reaction to it was, wait, really? There are people out there who think that? It really surprised me that there would be that narrow-mindedness, when I think what we've been discussing, makes the point. We're all kind of saying the same thing here. Regardless of how you consume the book, you're still consuming the book. And to Stormy's point that she was making earlier, the authors write these books. I don't think they mind how the book is read, as long as it is read in some way. And so, yeah, I'm completely with you there. I don't understand it either, Cav. But thank you for expressing that. Susan says, "I agree, Cav. There was a time long before any of us when the average person couldn't afford to purchase books, so the oral storyteller was the normal form of entertainment." Yeah, you're absolutely right there, Susan. All right, so you guys, I'm now going to move on to our second topic of the day, but I had a lot of fun discussing that one with you, so thank you very, very much to everyone who contributed to that. Our second topic of the day is one that takes us from a negative perspective on different ways that people can consume reading and the comments that are given to that, to something positive, which is the question, what makes a book sparkle for you? Now, when I ask that question, what makes a book sparkle for you, what I'm trying to say is, what makes a book for you? What makes it work for you? And I can't wait to hear what my co-hosts have to say. And while they're letting us know, if you are listening right now, type in the comments below, let us know, because I can't wait to see what you guys have to say either. All right, let's start with Hannah on this one. Hannah, what makes a book for you? What makes a book sparkle for you? What makes a book?
I don't know. There's so many different elements that go into it, but the biggest one would be a compelling story. Um, I really like my cozy mysteries, but I also like a good thriller in between all my cozies. You know, like just sprinkle a thriller in there. So this is spoiling my wrap up video that I'm gonna film in a couple of days. But my favorite book so far for the year was actually Alex Finley's The Night Shift, and I know Storm has read that book. There were just so many elements that were in that book that it was a great mystery. It had a lot of twists in it and compelling characters. So that's what made that book sparkle for me. But it kind of just depends on other books too, because I like a good historical fiction, and it depends on the period of time for that book to hit just right as well.
No, I can definitely understand that, and I think also potentially the genre itself, which I get that the question is incredibly generalized. Hannah, I'll jump back to you for a moment because now that I'm thinking about the question more specifically, what types of genres do you read?
Well, I've mainly been reading cozies since I joined the Killing Time of Cozy group last summer. But I
Mhm.
also like thrillers and I like historical romances, but I kind of like them like in between early World War One era, like the early 19th century to like around like now, kind of like the last 20 years from now. That's like my
Mhm.
niche area.
Oh,
That's kind of where
nice.
I've been reading, and I've really enjoyed what I've read in that era.
Oh, that's good. Oh, I'm glad to hear it. Well, I've heard some interesting terms coming out there, and I appreciate that. One of them being compelling, which I really do love, and I think definitely when I think of all the different genres that I read, I do think of different things that make that book sparkle for me. And when I think of a thriller or a mystery, it is different in comparison to, say, a contemporary or a fantasy. I am going to check in with Stormy. But Stormy, just to confirm, first of all, the book that Hannah was speaking about, she said that you read that one. Did you find that book compelling also?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that one too, and I think that author is like really good with his timelines, and I think that's one of the things that I like because he does like dual timelines, and most of the time I don't like that, but he does it in a way that like it really keeps it interesting, and you don't mind the flip flopping back and forth, and it did have interesting characters and everything, and you do want to find out what exactly happened. So you keep going.
Yes, very much so. I can understand that. Then getting back to the question as generalization, first of all, what types of genres do you read? I think you're pretty eclectic, but for those who don't know, and either as a generalization or if you want to be specific, what would make books sparkle for you?
Yeah, so I do read mostly like mystery and romance and cozies and all that kind of good stuff. Historical, and my mood changes, like it just really depends. But uh I'm more of a good plot type person. I need a fast paced book. I I don't like to get bogged down in a lot of description, but I do like good characters too, so don't get me wrong. But I think that's one of the reasons why I don't mesh very well with like fantasy is because
Mhm.
there's so much like description and world building and all that stuff that sometimes I get really bored. I can kind of do that if I'm listening to it on an audiobook, kind of keeps me going, but just reading, it's something
Yeah.
I can't do. I need it to be fast. I need to be engaged in it. I need to want to know what's going to happen next and things. But then I can find a book also that's has none of that, and I can still enjoy it. Like I think Years by Lavelle Spencer was one of those that it was, it was a big book. It wasn't normally what I would read, but at the same time, I just couldn't quit reading it. So it's like, it just really depends, I think, on how the story is told, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, good answer, Stormy. Nice. Thank you. And Jane, what about yourself? What types of genres do you read, and what makes a book sparkle for you?
Well, I read cozy mysteries, and I started getting into thrillers and suspense novels. And I've read classics before. I kind of get into moods where I'll read classics, or I was in a historical romance kick early last year, and all I read was historical romance, and I just got oversaturated. So now I just kind of pacing myself a bit more. Like I think I'll just read one or two at a time, and then kind of go back to my mysteries. Because I think I like the mystery genre most of all because I like the plot development and all the twists that come up. Like I was reading The End of Her by Sherry Lapina. I think it was last month, and I could not put that book down. I just wanted to know what was going to happen next. And when around the end, when the plot twist happened, I was like, my jaw just dropped. So like, I could not believe that's happened. Like, oh no, I could not. I was just totally shocked and like, oh, I could not believe it. That kind of thing, I think makes a book really good. So if you have a good plot and the characters are good, and there's a good twist at the end, I think that makes a book the best. I think it makes everything so when you're reading it, because it keeps your attention.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I would absolutely agree with you. I think so for me, I read all different types of genres. I mean, pretty much any genre aside from westerns. But and yeah, I agree. If a book is going to keep me compelled from the first page all the way through to the end, then that definitely does sparkle for me. I do think that it is, different things with different genres, but to keep it general, definitely I would agree, and I feel like that's something that we're all kind of saying. But I'm really, really intrigued to see what the rest of you have to say. So let's check it out. Cornflower says, "I love a good plot, but most important to me is that I can connect with the characters in some way." Yeah, absolutely. Cajun says, "What makes a book for me is that 1, I'm entertained, 2, that it holds my interest, 3, I care about the characters, and 4, in the case of a mystery, I can try to figure it out as I read along." Yeah, absolutely. This is something, this leads into me wanting to ask all of you guys a quick question before we continue on with the comments. Everyone here, one genre we all have in common is cozy mysteries. And so I have a two-part question. First part being, when you read a cozy mystery, do you try to solve that mystery while you're reading it? And if so, do you get disappointed if once you see the reveal, you think back and realize, well, there was no way that I could have worked it out? We'll start with Jane.
I'm really bad at figuring out the who did it. So I just read for the enjoyment of it, and like, sometimes I think once or twice towards the end of the book that when the main character is they're with the person that did it, and you kind of figure it out by then. But most of the time I'm just really bad at figuring it out. And what was your second question again?
So if you are trying to figure out who it is, when you get to the end and get the reveal and then realize upon reflection that there's no way you could have worked it out, like there weren't enough clues or whatever, is that disappointing?
I don't think it's disappointing. I think that's all the fun. That's the fun of reading a cozy mysteries, seeing how it got worked out in the end, how the author worked out the plot, and how that person did it. I think that's all the fun of figuring of getting there with the sleuth, how they work it out. If you're working it out with them, and then you figure it out once they get it, then okay, I got it now.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Hannah, what about yourself?
I always try to solve the mystery as I'm reading because it's just a fun who done it. So I'm like, ooh, let's try to figure it out. There was one book I was reading last year. It was Apple Cider Slaying, the first book in the Cider Shop series. And I was just like maybe 75% into the book or maybe 60%. And I go, wouldn't it be funny if it was this person that did it? And it was that person. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't even think it was that person. They weren't even on my radar. That's just so funny. But for the second part, I do get kind of disappointed if it is somebody that I don't suspect. One of my biggest pet peeves in a cozy is if the killer reveal is somebody that we never even met. I think that's like so unfair. And like they weren't even on my line of suspects because I didn't even know that they were a person. How come could it be some like how come we couldn't get some introduction to this person beforehand?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you on that. And so, excuse me. It's interesting. I think it really does come back to how invested you are in trying to solve the mystery as opposed to going along with the story. Both ways of reading are absolutely valid, but I do think from what I'm hearing, it does affect how much it's going to affect you depending on which way you do go. So I'm intrigued to see on which side Stormy lands on. Stormy, what about you?
I like to try to figure it out, but there's sometimes if it's like maybe it's my favorite setting, my favorite series, like the Library Lovers. I may not really care. I just want to read about my favorite characters and just be surprised at the end. But most of the time, I'm trying to figure it out. And there's been a few times when I like read something, and I'm like, oh wait, oh, that's the killer because I remember at the beginning of the book they did this. But that doesn't happen a lot, but sometimes I can, and it's like, oh, I just feel kind of satisfied that I remembered like something from the beginning that kind of leads to you figuring out who the killer was. I even figured out like who the killer was in The Night Shift. I didn't figure out all the twists and turns, but I still figured it out. I will try, no matter if it's a thriller or if it's a mystery, to try to figure out who done it.
Ah, nice. Excellent. Ah, very intriguing, guys. Yeah, for me, I do try to work out who it is. And if I get to the end and find out that there was no way I would have been able to solve it, it does let me down. But again, it comes back to how invested I was in trying to solve it in the first place. But very, very interesting, guys. And Cajun, thank you very much for your comment. Cav says, I need to connect with the characters. They can be messed up and complicated, but I need to empathize with them. All right, let's respond to this one, guys. Jane, I'll go over to you. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I think if you can connect with the characters, then you get more invested in the story. Because if you have a character that's a real jerk or they're just acting like an idiot, like you don't really care. Like if something happens to them, you think, oh, they're acting like an idiot, so they almost like you don't pay attention. You don't have anything invested in that person. So I think if there's certain things about them that are nice or likable about them, then you feel it stabs you in the heart when something bad happens to them. But if they're acting like a jerk, then you kind of don't really care, I guess. Like, it doesn't really matter if something bad to them happens to them because it's almost like karma. Like they kind of deserve it. I mean, that doesn't sound very nice, but that's I guess sometimes that you get characters like that where you can't help but feel like they kind of deserve whatever is happening to them if they're acting like an idiot.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Hannah, what about you?
I agree. I want my characters like I want somebody I'm going to root for. If my main character is so unlikable, I'm just going to start wishing for their demise. Or even like if one of like the main antagonists, like there is one book I was reading, Behind Closed Doors, where the husband character was so cartoonishly evil, but like more cartoonishly evil than normal, that I was like, I want this person to suffer, and I want this person to have like a most satisfying suffering ever because he's so terrible. And I related to the main character and her situation. I was rooting for her. So yeah, like if the main character is so unlikable, then I'm just gonna wish for their demise or for them to suffer in some sort of way with some, like, humble them out a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Completely agree with you there, Hannah. Stormy, what about yourself?
Oh, messed up and complicated, yes, I can handle that, but I still have to like the character. If I'm not liking the character, then I'm not liking the book, and then I'm most likely not going to read the book. So I have to like them in some way. Like I was just the horror book that I just finished. They were all deplorable and horrible, so I had nobody to root for. So I was just like, kill them all. I don't care. Finish. I just want to finish this book because there was nobody to root for. I have to have at least somebody to root for, and if I don't have that, then I'm not really having a good time.
Yeah. No, fair enough.
It's
I have
really
to
bad
ask.
as if you're rooting for the killer.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I have to ask Stormy, does it make a difference being a horror if you're not liking them at all and therefore you want them to die, being that it's horror, they might die? Like, does that
Yeah,
is it easier to deal with?
I think that even in horror, even if they're going to die, you still want somebody to root for. You want to hope that person makes it out in the end. They might not, and it might make you sad, but you really need somebody. At least I do. I need somebody to root for. I mean, most of the time when you read a horror, there's going to be like 3 or 4 people that you just despise. But, and you know that those are probably the characters that are going to die. And so then whenever a character you like dies, then you're like, no, why didn't you kill these people over here that are horrible?
Yes, that's a good point. Excellent. Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying, Cav. I need to be able to invest in my characters. If I don't, I can find it very boring. I think maybe with a horror, I can try and seek my own little fantasy vengeance. Like, okay, if they're gonna die, then I might be fine with that. But yeah, definitely, there needs to be some sort of investment there as a hook that's going to keep me motivated to keep reading. So seems like we're all in agreement there. Susan says, for me, it sparkles if the story keeps me so entertained that it keeps me up all night, something I can't put down. I love that, Susan. Okay, we're going around the table for this one. I want to know if you guys have read a book that has kept you up all night, and if so, what was it called? Let's go in reverse order. We'll start with Hannah.
So there were 2 books that I read last year that I was up all night reading. One was The Push by Ashley Audrain. There was a twist in the middle of the book that I got to around 11 o'clock at night. And I said, okay, well, it looks like I have to be at work at like 1 o'clock the next afternoon. So I'm staying up all night and I will sleep after I'm done with this book. And then another book that I read was The Last Flight by Julia Clark or Julie Clark. It was a really, really good thriller novel, and I absolutely loved it. I got it from the library, and I binged through it, and I took it back to the library, and the librarian was very confused why I was bringing the book back so quickly.
Oh, I love it. Did you explain to them that you'd binged it all night?
Oh, yeah. I said, I'm back with your book. And she goes, did you not like it? And I go, no, I loved it. I finished it already. And she goes, already? And I go, yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Oh, that's fantastic, Hannah. I love that. Stormy, what about you?
A book that I like all night, stay up late. I do that with a lot of my mysteries, no matter what it is. If I'm like really close to figuring out who done it, then I can't go to bed until I figure it out.
I like that.
There is one book though. I wasn't reading it at night. It didn't keep me up, but it did keep me in my room, and I was like, nobody is going to mess with me. I'm reading this book. I'm going to finish it. And that was Years by Lavelle Spencer. I was almost done, and I'm like, nope. Nobody. I was like, in my room, do not bother me. I'm finishing this book.
You know it's good when you're saying, don't bother me, I'm reading.
Yep. I'm like, tell Dad, okay, you can get supper as soon as I'm done with this, but it ain't happening until.
Exactly. I love it. Jane, what about you?
Well, there's two books. The one that I mentioned before, "The End of Her" by Sherry Lapina. I started that book and I was reading it at night in my bed, and I just could not stop reading it, and I was just hooked on it the whole entire time. And when I finished it, like, oh, that was like the ending was just crazy. And the other one was just recently finished it. It was "No Exit" by Taylor Adams. And that one, again, I was reading it in the dark at night. It was probably not the best idea, but throughout the entire book, I was wincing, like, and my jaw was dropping. It was just like, oh, this is disgusting, but I could not stop. And after I was finished, I was messaging back and forth with Hannah, and we were talking about it for a little bit, and I was saying like, I should not be reading. I don't think I should be reading this at night because it was just so gross and disgusting and just oh. But I think I borrowed it that day and I finished it that night or something like that. I couldn't put it down.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. If when you get to that point where you're like, oh, I definitely, shouldn't be reading this right now, but yet you can't stop. I love that. Were you and Hannah buddy reading it?
No, I think Hannah, you finished it before I did, way before I did, and so we just kind of talked. We were private messaged each other that night, just talking about what scenes that were really really nasty, and we just had a little bit of a chat there about it.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, that's good though. Nice. I don't know if actually, yeah, there is one book that kept me up all night. It was compelling, but it more kept me up all night because it was an incredibly popular book and I didn't want to be spoiled. So I picked it up on the day that it came out, that it was the mass market release day, and quickly got through it. It was a massive book to not get spoiled. But yeah, I think that was the one that kept me up all night. But I generally read earlier on in the day anyway. So for me, if I'm to say a book kept me up all night, a book may keep me going all throughout the day rather than keeping me up all night. But loving these answers, guys. Cornflower says, also, if I cry when I'm done reading the book, I know it was a good book for me, and I love pretty much all genres. Nice, Cornflower, that you do. And yeah, completely agree. Oh my gosh, we have to open this one up to the floor. And you guys are commenting as well. I want to open it up to you too. Have you cried over a book? And how did that make you feel? Did that make you think it was a good book, or what was the deal for your end? Let's open up with Stormy. Stormy, have you cried over a book before?
I don't like crying over books, but yeah, a lot of times there'll be a little tears right there at the edge or whatever. I personally don't like to cry for the book, and I usually try to pick books that won't make me cry. But then there's that one that you don't know that there's going to be content in there that's going to make you cry, like Years from Lavelle Spencer again. It hurt my heart. But then I still loved it, but it hurt my heart.
Oh. Jane, what about you?
I don't think I've had a book that made me cry. I think it might have hit me in the heart a few times where I think, oh, that is such a sweet scene. But yeah, I think there's a book. I think it's a novella or something like that. But it's the end of this series by Lorraine Heath, where we already know that the main hero, the hero in the book, He's the father of the kids in the series that she in this particular group of books, and it talks about how he met his wife, and we already know something like in the end we already by this time we already know that she's gonna be dead in the series, so it kind of goes backwards to how he met her, and I think I've heard from booktubers that love Lorraine Heath that book makes them cry because they know what happens with the husband and the wife, what happened to the wife. So that might make me cry, but I don't know.
Oh, I can see why it might. Yes. Wow. Hannah, what about you?
I cry at everything, to be honest. But surprisingly, this year I have not cried to a book yet. But last year it was like almost every book I was picking up that was not a cozy mystery. I was crying at the end of it, especially like the historical fiction books I was reading. I was a sobbing mess. My mom walked in one morning when I finished The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna, and she was like, "Why are you crying?" And I go, "This book is so emotional. I can't handle it."
Yeah. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you because I've been there with my mum too. Like, it's this book. Oh my gosh. I
Oh no, you're
love
fine if you laugh at me. I laugh at myself all the time.
Same for me too. Go right ahead. Yeah, I love that we all have different responses here, and I also love your response to that, Hannah, saying I haven't cried yet this year yet, but I do with a lot of them. I love that.
That's because all she's reading is cozy mysteries and thrillers. She needs to get some more of that historical fiction stuff going on.
It's probably going to happen in May. That's when I'm hitting my TBR from the oldest books that have been on there. And there's a few historical fictions that I feel like are going to make me cry.
Oh, wow. There we go. Yeah, so I've had some books that have made me cry, and I can think of two off the top of my head that made me cry. Like, one made me cry because I was just really sad, where another one made me cry tears of joy. So I read A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, and I burst into tears by the end of that book. I won't say why because obviously it'll be a spoiler, but yeah, burst into tears for that one. And then the last book in the selection series, which is funny because it's a YA, but I had become so caught up in that world and everything that was going on that something happened from out of nowhere and it just caught me way off guard. But I don't mind crying over books. If a book is going to have such a powerful effect over me that I'm going to cry, then I credit the author for that. It just feels like it changes the experience to a higher level for me if it's going to evoke that type of reaction out of me. But thank you for that, Cornflower. Cajun says, I also love a book that makes me laugh, but that is not a requirement. Yeah, always good to have a laugh with a book. Completely agree with you. Let's try and make this a yes or no question for the panel, shall we? The question is, have you read a book that has made you laugh so far this year? Let's start with Jane.
Yes, it made me chuckle. It was Midnight Snacks or Murder. That one was extremely funny.
Stormy, that's such good news for us, considering we're going to read it next month.
I know. I watched her video when she was talking about it, and it sounds like it's going to be really good. So I'm like, hopefully, maybe, yes, maybe we'll like it.
Yes, wouldn't that be amazing? Stormy, while I have you read a book that made you laugh this year?
Yeah, I've had a lot of them that make me laugh. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to think. A lot of the cozy mysteries always make me laugh. The Country Club series by Julie Mulhern, it makes me chuckle. I read two of them from that, the 12th and the 13th book, Night Moves and Lion Eyes. That series, it's set in the 70s, and is always making me chuckle, because the mother on there is kind of like, I can't believe you keep finding like these dead bodies, and you're supposed to be, it's country club life, and you're not supposed to do that. And it's not like she means to find another body or whatever. And so it always cracks me up. And White Hot by Ilona Andrews, I just read that not too long ago, and the banter between the two main characters makes me laugh a lot. So
Nice. Oh, good. And Hannah, what about you?
Yes. In fact, a book that I finished last week was Saddled Up for Murder by J.C. Eaton, and it had me cracking up throughout the entire book.
I can't wait to read that. I'm
Oh,
reading that one next month.
I'm so excited
nice.
for you to read it.
Yee. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, so Cajun, I definitely agree with you. It's definitely not a requirement for me, but if I can have a book that does make me laugh, then it's definitely a bonus, and definitely a book that sparkles for me. When I think about a book that makes me laugh, I go back to, I think it was last year when I read it. It's a book called I've Got Your Number by Sophie Kinsella, an adult romance, and I was laughing, I think, every page, if not every second page, which I've never experienced laughing that much with a book. But yeah, made me really, really, really happy. Cornflower says, not meaning I cried because it was sad, but just because it's over. Sigh. Oh, yes. I know the feeling when you're invested in a particular book or even a particular series, and that book or series ends, the loss that we experience. I think on BookTube we have a term for this called a bookish hangover. And I've definitely experienced those in the past, so I can definitely empathize with you there. I want to see if everyone else here has also. Let's go over to Hannah. Hannah, have you had a situation like this with a book or a series?
Yeah. I just can't remember when. It would probably be last
That's
year
okay.
when I finished The Push, just because the story, like how it ended, I was like, that was it. That was everything. I need more. You can't just end a book like that.
And what is the? I haven't read it yet. Was The Push a standalone or part of a series?
So far it's just a standalone. I think that's how the author intended it to be, but the epilogue ended on a cliffhanger, and that was just not a fair cliffhanger
Oh.
for a book to end off of.
Oh. Okay. Wow. There you go. Jane, what about you? Have you been in that situation with reading?
Yeah, I've read a couple of thrillers where the way it ended, you're thinking to yourself, like what Hannah said is that's it. Like, what happens what happens in the future? Like they don't have an epilogue that says 5 months later what happens to the characters that are left behind and what happens to them. It just kind of stops at a
Yeah.
point, and then what you're left wondering. I guess you have to picture it in your mind what you think might have happened because the author didn't write it out. So that
Yep.
sometimes I find that like, I wish that they'd have some kind of epilogue that talks about what happened to these characters in the future to kind of end the story a bit.
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely understand that. I know that there are readers out there who don't mind coming up with their own thoughts about how things would go once the book is over, but I'm definitely not like that. I want the author to tell me, so I agree with you. Stormy, what about yourself?
I'm going to start out with saying I don't like open-ended stories.
Yeah.
Which is what it sounds like you guys were talking like it leaves it off, and like you're like you got to figure out, well, what happened. I don't like those kind. But I don't often have book hangovers. I don't think I usually just go from one book to another, but there are some that I may think about after, but I'm not one of those that I can't read anything else because I just read this ultimate book I don't do that very often.
Yeah, no, that's good. I definitely used to have it a lot more when I was younger. When I was literally going from book to book and I wasn't reading as much as I do now. I think it does make a difference because I read so many books every month to just transition over from one book to the next book and just keep going. But I will say, excuse me, I will say that there is a series that I always have a book hangover with every time I read the series, and that's the Harry Potter series. Every time I get to the end of it, it's just like, oh my goodness, now there's no more until I do another reread. But yeah, definitely, book hangovers can be tough when we experience them. Thank you, Cornflower. Cav says, and when an author can make a setting come to life, especially in a series, it keeps me coming back for more. Yes, definitely, Cav. I agree. I'm going to try and scroll through the comments. Cajun says, I always think of Lonesome Dave, which I threw across the room. It was a paperback because I was so upset one of the characters died. So not positive, but still sparkle in the sense that I was captivated. Yeah, and I think it shows just how invested you were that you had that reaction. I understand it. I remember in 2020 reading one of my top 5 books of all time, Mistborn: The Final Empire. A character dies in that book. I won't say who. And I had become incredibly invested and in that character. I absolutely loved this character to the point that I will never forget thinking, I'm going to reenact misery with Brandon Sanderson over what he just did. But yeah, definitely. I would love to see if you guys have had major reactions like that when a character has died that you're invested in. Let's go with Stormy first.
Yeah, I can get quite aggravated whenever a character that I like dies. That happened in Harry Potter. That happened in the Kate Daniels series by Ilona Andrews, and I'm putting off a book in the Dresden Files because I know that something's going to happen, and so I haven't read it yet because I know something's going to happen and I'm not prepared.
Oh no! Oh gosh, Hannah, what about you?
I mean, I just got done reading Goblet of Fire, and I wasn't it's been so long since I read the book, so I forgot like 90% of the book, and I forgot who died in the book, despite social media telling me, and I was just not paying attention. So whenever I got there, I was like, oh wow, that was not anything like what I was expecting. And yeah, yeah, I remember thinking the last quarter of Goblet of Fire was probably like the most dark, like not dark, but it was so dreadful, but then there was so much hope in it, and then it really changed it to being like my favorite book in the series. But yeah, like I was not expecting that character to die in the book. I was like, oh wow.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. Had some major reactions with that one personally. Jane, what about yourself?
Well, when I first fantasy I ever read was Lord of the Rings. I read all 3 books, and I remember in the third book, or what happens to Frodo. He goes to, this is Tolkien's version of heaven. That scene was kind of sad to me because in the movie you see him getting on the boat and he's looking back at Sam and Pippin and Merry, and he has this kind of it's not bittersweet smile, but he just kind of has this smile on his face, like almost saying goodbye, but he's not waving to them. It's not like it's not to see you later kind of expression on his face. It's kind of looks almost sad when looking back at him.
Yeah, I remember that moment. Oh wow. Okay, Susan says, I like to read mysteries, cozies, thriller, and suspense, adventure sometimes, Also romance, either tame or spicy. Nice. Cajun says, also, if I dream about the characters, although that may be a little too involved. Cajun, you're not alone if you have. I always, at least in the back of my mind, try to figure it out, but there should always be a way, even if in retrospect, for the reader to get the solution. Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying there, Cajun. For me, as someone who has always loved solving mysteries, whether it be in a book medium or a show or film medium, whenever I get the answer, if I did not have that answer, I do try to go back and see if I could have solved it, if there were things that I just hadn't picked up on. And if for whatever reason I find it that there's just no way I could have solved this, it really does annoy me. But yeah, so definitely I agree with you. Cajun says, I consider it unfair cheating if it comes from absolutely nowhere. I can say this without saying where it comes from, but if you know, you know. The whole twin reveal doesn't work for me. I'm just going to put that out there and let the universe handle that one. Yeah, with no
Cough,
clues
cough,
along
Pretty
the way.
Little Liars, cough, cough.
Cough, 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 cough. Yes, Hannah. So I'm guessing you watched that series too.
No, but I have friends who have watched the series, and I remember when the finale came up, I got so many phone calls and text messages because they know I don't watch it. So if I get spoiled, I won't remember. And I just remember them going off and on and on and on about it. I was like, no, I understand that it's a really stupid way to end it.
Yes. Oh, exactly. Oh my goodness. Cornflower says, "Ooh, behind closed doors was so good." I agree with you, Hannah. Ari, the antagonist. Hannah, I'll let you respond to that.
Right, he was terrible. He was such an evil. Like, if you take the most evil person that you can imagine and just elevate it, that's it. Like, that's that person. And I'm quoting one of my videos when I said, "Don't ignore the red flags, because if you ignore the red flags, you end up on a true crime podcast episode." And that's what the main character basically did.
Oh wow. Oh, I feel like I should read this book. I want to get involved in the conversation. Hi, Z Spumoni. Z Spumoni says, not having any likable characters is a huge pet peeve for me. I don't want to read a full book rooting for it to just end. Yeah, absolutely. Cav says, Cry Book, The Last Bookshop in London by Madeline Martin, WW2. What touched me was the way the author captured the resiliency of Londoners and the power of story that brings them together. Aww. Susan says, I usually cry in a book when a child or animal is hurt or dies. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. If I can, I try to go into every single book that I read blind, but if I can find out prior to reading a book that there is going to be some sort of animal harm going on, I will not read the book, because of just how much that I know that will affect me. Which brings up an interesting general question that I can ask you guys. If you were, what would stop you from reading a book if you were to find out a particular theme came up in that book? Let's go with Stormy first.
I don't know. The animal thing really gets me. It depends on if it's what context it's in, I guess. If it's just, the author throwing in like, a hurt animal or killing an animal or whatever, then I don't like it. But I don't think there's a whole lot. I don't really have any trigger warnings. That it doesn't. I mean, I read horror, so I mean, there's all kinds of stuff in horror, but it's funny because like my friend, she will dock a star if a dog is killed in her horror or anything.
Oh wow! I love that. Is that Bob?
She does not like animals, and it's funny because we're reading horror, and so all these people are dying, but don't kill the animal.
Yes, I agree with your friend. I love it. Jane, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think anything where something is people are being inappropriate with children, that's a no-no with me. Because I was reading, it was a sequel to The Shining. I think it's called The Big Sleep or something like that.
Dr. Sleep.
Yes, Dr. Sleep. Thank you. And so the groundskeeper, I think he was in the first book. He's talking to Danny about how his father was being inappropriate with him, and I'm thinking, this you're talking to a child about something like this that's happened to you when you were a kid. It's totally inappropriate. Even no, I didn't even get like one chapter into it. I just had to drop it because I just could not read any more of that book. It's just inappropriate. I didn't like it. Turned me off totally.
Yep, completely understand. Definitely get that, Jane. I would have to say, piggybacking off of that, that if I find out about any form of child abuse, that it would really depend for me, but I know at the least I will struggle to read it. Hannah, let's jump over to you. What about yourself?
Yeah, I would say like any like essay or R-word towards anybody, that's just a huge turn off for me of any book. I mean, death, it's so difficult with death because like I don't know how to explain it. Like it is not, it's very unsettling, but it's not something that's going to make me stop reading the book, if that makes sense, especially if I don't know what's going to happen. I'll just be like, okay, well, that happened.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to change my view of the book, but I'm still going to keep reading it, if that makes sense. Like, with No Exit, because it did involve a child. It did alter like how I view the book, especially when we find out what was going to happen with the child that was kidnapped. That really changed how I saw the book.
Okay. Sorry, did I miss? Did you name what the book was? If you did, I missed it. That's why I'm asking.
No Exit. It's the same book that Jane mentioned earlier. It has a child that gets kidnapped. That's part of the plot, and so and then you find out in the book what the intention, what was going to happen with the kidnapped child, and I mean it I don't want to spoil it now, but that's spoiler alert if you want to read the book. You can just read it really quick, cool. But the kid does not go to the intended place.
Right. Okay. Yeah, oh wow. Wow.
Those two, the characters, the baddies, they were bad. They were like worse than bad. They were disgusting and cruel and I just feel like it's creepy crawly and
I love listening to you guys talk about it because I thought the book was boring. So.
What's the genre?
It was bad because there was something going on.
Is it a thriller?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a thriller.
Yeah. Wow. There you go. Yeah. Interesting to see the different opinions. Susan also says she laughed through Midnight Snacks are murder. Yay. Making Stormy and I happy to hear that. Zispamoni says, Assassination Vacation by Sarah Vowell made me laugh out loud, and it's non-fiction, which shows how talented the author is. Wow, that is fantastic that you had non-fiction that made you laugh. That's wonderful. I love that. Cajun says, I cannot tolerate anything happening to an animal and quit a series mid-sentence because of that, not having that. Yep, I completely understand why you would draw that hard and fast line there. Yep, Z-Spamonia Green. Cajun says, I'm like your friend Storm. Take out all the humans if you want to, but leave the animals alone. Yeah. Interesting, Stormy, when you were commenting on that about your friend taking away the star. So you said they took away 1 star for what happened with the animal. Did they end up giving the book ultimately overall a high rating?
Well, yeah, like she'll say she's really enjoying it, and it could have been a 5-star read, but it's going to be a 4-star read because she docked it. If it was going to be a 4-star read, she's going to dock it a star. It's going to be 3 stars. So
right. Yeah.
She can still enjoy it, but she does not like it when that happens, and she'll still read the book, but she's going to dock it a star.
It's an automatic docking of a star. I like that. Okay, Cajun says, guess which Harry Potter death left me sobbing so hard I had to quit reading for the day. I won't guess because I don't want to spoil. However, I will make a very quick announcement considering that it is my podcast. Coming up at some point in the not too distant future, Johara from the Witchy Reader and myself are going to be doing a Harry Potter spoilery chat. So if you guys want to come along to that, feel free to let us know. We're very excited about it. But Cajun, I'd love to discuss that with you privately so we don't spoil. But yeah, I'm intrigued. Sorry. Susan says, I love Nora Roberts, but there is one book that I know of that a dog is killed, so I won't read it. I'm going to go to Stormy on that one. Stormy, do you know of the book she's talking about?
I don't. I don't know a lot of Nora Roberts books. That would definitely be a Lee thing. She knows a lot of Nora Roberts. But yeah, if I know about the death, like me and my friend, we'll be reading like the same book, like we're buddy reading a book. If we come upon that part, we'll automatically tell the other person, okay, there's an animal that dies. And they're like, and she'll be like, okay, thanks for letting me be prepared. And we'll still read it. But I mean, I think if I knew that there was going to be an animal death, I may skip it, but I'll still read it. And, but it's, I'm like her though. I probably would dock it a star too. But, like she read a horror book that was the dogs were the bad guys. And I'm like, you do know that you're totally reading a book where you know the dogs are going to die. And she goes, yes, but I'm prepared because I know.
Like, okay. She's like,
and
I
the fact
took
that the
many
dogs are
days
the bad
ahead
guys.
of time to prepare for this.
Yes, pretty much. Yeah, she's prepared herself, so it's okay.
Yes, exactly. Cajun says, is it one of the in death because I'll need to avoid that one unless I've passed it already. Yep.
That's normal.
Right. Thank you. Cornflower says, which thriller was that? Missed the title. Are we talking about No
Hannah
Exit?
told her down below.
Sorry?
The next one down, Hannah told her it was the No Exit.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Hannah. Might be one I should avoid.
Sneaky like that.
Yep. Sorry?
I said, you're welcome. I'm sneaky like that.
I love it, Hannah. I appreciate it. Susan G says, I believe the Nora Roberts book is called Montana Sky. It's a standalone. Ooh,
okay.
There we go. And Cajun is saying thank you. Wow. There we go. All right. Well, we are getting We are getting closer to the 2-hour mark, which is nearly double the amount of time that I'm normally doing a podcast. So this has been a whole lot of fun. But there is no way that I'm going to let anyone go before I check in with my favorite question, which is what's coming up with you on your channel? So let's. Oh, hello. I didn't mean to do that. I meant to do that. Let's check in with Hannah. Hannah, what's coming up on with you on your channel?
So I'm going to be doing my March 2022 wrap up, and I think that's pretty much all I have going on. I might do another tag video. I don't know. I just kind of fly by what interests me at the moment. I'm trying to do vlogs again. It just depends on if my computer will let me do vlogs.
Oh. Oh gosh, good luck with that. There's so many things that can go on behind the scenes that we may want to do things, but because of this or that, it's just not going to work out. I feel for you, Hannah. But I hope it works out for you. And I'm very intrigued. I love my monthly wraps, so very intrigued. And you can find Hannah over on Buggy Reads. So if you have not checked her out, I definitely recommend to do so. Love her videos. You definitely won't regret it. Over to Jane with the Reading Nook. What's coming up for you, Jane?
I'm planning on doing a cozy mysteries for beginners video, like a recommendation and how explaining what cozy mysteries are, things like that. And I'm probably going to do another reading vlog type of thing maybe next week. I find doing the selfie style I find it easier to put together and edit. So I'll probably be doing more of that next week.
Oh, wonderful. That sounds good, Jane. And yeah, once again, Jane is from the Reading Nook. So definitely go check out her channel. And Stormy, who's over on Storm Reads, what's coming up for you?
Well, I have 2 videos that I need to edit, but I have my April anticipated reads and I have my April TBR. And then I will be making my March wrap up. And I think that's pretty much all I have lined up as of now, except for, of course, my weekly reading vlogs that I always do. So.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. And yeah, if you have not subscribed to Stormy, her channel is Storm Reads. Go ahead and do that. All of my wonderful co-hosts have fabulous booktube channels. If you love to read, you won't regret checking out their channels. I love them. I'm checking them out every week. So I highly, highly recommend them. You definitely won't be disappointed. Yeah, for me, I have the same. I have my TBR for April, my monthly wrap, and then I, sorry, and then I have 2 celebrating booktubers that will come up in April because I wasn't able to fit in one in March. So one will come up incredibly early on, like within the first couple of days in April. So you can look out for that as well. Cajun says, this was so much fun. Thank you for hosting, Mr. Francy. You're so very, very welcome, Cajun. I want to say thank you to everyone for joining us today. Everyone who has left comments, I really appreciate it. To take the step and make this podcast live and interactive, I think was a really good decision because it's just been so much fun to be able to interact with you guys while doing it as opposed to just being there myself. And you guys really just make that work. So thank you so much. It is very much appreciated. And if you are listening to the replay of this, hello and welcome. I haven't forgotten you either. Thank you for listening to the replay. I very much appreciate it. I also want to take this opportunity to thank my wonderful and incredibly informative co-hosts. You guys have just made this an incredibly intriguing discussion. So thank you very, very much to Hannah, to Jane, and to Stormy. Before I do, I am going to let you go. I just want to shout out that both Stormy and myself do reading sprints. So just very quickly, Stormy, can you tell everyone what day and time you usually do it in case they want to check it out?
I do Friday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern.
Wonderful. So yes, definitely go ahead and check those out. Stormy does amazing reading sprints. And I do reading sprints as well, and I would love to tell you the time, but apparently I wasn't aware, everyone, that time zones have changed and that the hour has moved forward during the month this month. So I'm a bit off in knowing what the time is. I think it's at 9 o'clock Eastern.
Is it the same time as last time?
Yes.
I think it's 9 o'clock. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Stormy. I really appreciate it. It's tough being on the other side of the world
9
sometimes.
o'clock Central, though, because
it's like 10 o'clock Eastern.
when we got
Sorry, what were you saying, Hannah?
Oh, I was just saying, I think it's 9 o'clock Central Time because the last time you and Jessica did the reading sprints, it showed up on my time zone, Central Time Zone, as 9 o'clock. So it would be 10 o'clock Golden Girls time or Eastern.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for referring to Golden Girls time. Okay, so 9 o'clock Central, 10 o'clock Eastern, and that is on, I'm trying to remember, that is on Fridays that we do that. Or if you're Australian, it's on Saturdays. All right, guys, this has just been absolutely fantastic. And so the live podcasts will definitely continue because of just how much fun I had with this. So thank you very, very much. All right, guys, be kind, love one another, and especially considering how things are at the moment with the world, please do what you can to spread that sparkling positive energy all throughout the universe. I thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. And of course, as I always say, happy reading. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.